It's time to update the UFC greatest fighters of all time list. And before anybody comes at me with recency bias, the UFC GOAT list should be treated sort of like a pound for pound list, but for resume. And because the sport has only been around for 30 years, 32 years basically, it's still in its infancy. And for that reason, things are constantly changing. Anyone who says recency bias, like, I'm sorry, but when fighters win, they can pass the retired fighters that have not been doing anything. All right, you can't just keep your spot because people want you to keep your spot because they have fucking nostalgia bias. It's like a pound for pound list. It's based on resume. This ain't based on the vibes. And dude, I'm going to give an updated version of the GOAT list. And I have a top 15. And we're not going to spend forever on all of these. I just wanted to tell you guys what my list is today. We have some new fighters in the top 10. And you know what? I spoke about DJ a few times throughout the past couple of months, and I actually moved Demetrius Johnson up just a tiny bit, and I'll talk about that, and I'll tell you why. But before we get into this, I just wanted to give some honorable mentions for fighters that I believe are right outside of the top 15. I have Fedor Emelianenko at my number 16 spot. I know we like to joke around. We like to, mess around with the Fedor song and all that. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of Fedor. But the reason why I took him out of my top 15 is because a lot of his wins are over, guys from the 90s that really weren't that good. Okay? And he got KO'd a bunch of times in his mid-30s. And people will say things like, dude, just because he was in his mid-30s doesn't mean he wasn't out of his prime. It's like, I'm sorry, but pretty much every single heavyweight and light heavyweight do really well in their late 30s. Just because Fedor was losing, that doesn't mean that he was out of his prime, okay? Those are prime years. But I actually think that people don't put enough respect on Fedor, including myself in the past, because there's something about being on top, being the king on the hill for a long period of time. And I believe that Fedor Emelianenko went unbeaten for an insanely long period of time. And I actually value that quite a bit. I think that it's almost more impressive to be the number one guy in the world where nobody is beating you in your prime. For example, like Jose Aldo, people will say Jose Aldo was on top for 15 years. Why isn't he still the featherweight GOAT? It's because Jose Aldo got beat while he was still young. And I'm not going to sit here and say that, oh, wait, never mind, he was washed when he was 31. Fucking bullshit. Jose Aldo, to this day, yes, he's definitely not in his prime, but the way he's looking, how fast he is, that's not somebody that's washed at all. All right? I'm not saying he's in his prime today, but Jose Aldo at 31, if he's looking really fast these days, still looks like he has it these days, 6 or 7 years ago when he was 31, don't tell me he was washed. Okay, that nonsense. But Jose Aldo lost a bunch when he was in his prime. So that's the thing that I'm talking about. Fedor, yeah, he lost a little bit when he was in his prime, but there's still something to be said about being on the top of the mountain for a long time. Okay? So that's really good. Dustin Poirier, I think I have Dustin in my top 20. Petr Yan, I think it's time we start talking about Petr Yan. I actually think Petr Yan has a better resume than Dominic Cruz. I know that that's an argument that people may not be ready for. I think nowadays most people agree that Merab is now the bantamweight GOAT. But Merab's best win is Petr Yan. If you look at Yan's resume, it's insane. Yan's resume is unbelievable. I think he's the top 20 fighter of all time. Dominic Cruz, he's in the mix as well. People will bring up TJ Dillashaw. I just simply disagree. TJ lost to Dominic Cruz. If you take away TJ's biggest, not best wins, but his biggest wins over Cody Garbrandt. Those were the big spectacle wins that TJ has. Those were the wins where TJ was on top. Cody Garbrandt wins are not that good. All right? They're not that impressive at all. So I think if you take those away, of course you have the wins against guys like Barao. Those are really impressive. But outside of that, I still think he lost to Corey Sandhagen. Okay, I think that was a robbery. I kind of count that as a loss. The Barao wins, I mean, to be honest, outside of that, I really don't think TJ Dillashaw's resume can stand on its own two legs next to Petr Yan's. Not even Dominic Cruz's and not Merab's. Aljamain Sterling, people say, is a great resume and whatnot. He does have a good resume. But the whole most title defenses, Aldo is the most title defenses. That's based on him beating Jan the first fight where he got his ass kicked and Jan landed an illegal knee. That's maybe not a Jan win on paper, but it certainly isn't an Aljamain win. The TJ Dillashaw fight that Aljamain had, that doesn't really do a whole lot for his legacy since TJ had one arm. But, and I also think that Adesanya is someone that is an honorable mention. I think that is becoming less of a strong case with the more losses he's getting as he's in his prime. Because, again, Adesanya fans will say things like, oh, he's not in his prime, but now he's in his prime. Oh, he's not in his prime, but now he's in his prime. Adesanya is 35 years old. That is not that old for a middleweight. It's not, this guy's an up-and-coming surging contender age, but 35 is still good years for middleweight. If he beats Nasruddin Imavov, then it's okay, for sure, he's probably top 20 all time, but I just think he has a lot of losses when he's in his prime, so. But I also want to mention him because he's certainly in the conversation. But now let's get into the top 15 fighters. Stipe Miocic is still, in my opinion, at that number 15 spot, right? The loss to Jon Jones is unfortunate, but that was a guy that looked washed, okay? That was a guy that looked washed. I don't think that hurts his legacy that much. Justice for Jones, it moves Jon Jones up a centimeter on the GOAT list, right? But it doesn't really create that big of a distance between Jones and number 2, any more of a distance, rather. So I still have Stipe at number 15. Anderson Silva, I have Anderson Silva at my number 14 spot. Again, Anderson Silva losing when he was 40 years old to Adesanya. I don't think that really hurts his legacy that much. And he didn't really lose till he was 38. Granted, they weren't great losses, but either way, he wasn't really getting beaten at his peak for a long time. But he can't be that high because his wins aren't that amazing. I have DC at number 13, Daniel Cormier. He's moved down just a tiny bit. I had DC at my 11 or 12 spot in my last video, but because I've moved other people up, DC has gone down. I believe that Merab, for example, passed DC recently. And again, one of the main reasons is Merab, 2 losses in his career, just like Daniel Cormier has a couple losses, but Cormier, granted his losses are against some of the greatest fighters to ever do it, Merab ain't losing in his prime. So I also think Merab's got he's edged out some better wins. I have Jose Aldo at my number 12 spot. And I have Demetrius Johnson at my 11 spot. I flipped these guys, okay? Demetrius Johnson, I know just saying DJ's at 11, people are going to start rioting. Can you name me more than 4 good Demetrius Johnson wins? But before we get into that, Jose Aldo, I still think Jose is one of the greatest, but I'm sorry. There's something to be said about DJ not getting KO'd and beaten real badly multiple times when he was in his prime. And I know that people are going to be saying Aldo was in his prime when he was 25. Dude, if Aldo was in his prime when he was 25, then I guess he was slightly washed up at 28 when he was fighting Conor. And when he was on that crazy win streak at bantamweight before he fought Merab, a 3-fight win streak, I guess he was as washed as Stipe Miocic is today. Or is that what we're doing? So what does that make him now? Does that mean Jose Aldo is one of the fish in the SpongeBob movie? Fucking frying under the light? I don't think so, okay? Jose Aldo lost because he fought better fighters. He finally faced guys that could piece him up. And I just simply think he has a little bit too many losses while he's in his late 20s, early 30s. And I just can't say he's washed because he's still fucking lightning fast. And he's still got some of the best takedown defense ever. If Jose Aldo started getting taken down recently, if we saw Jose get taken down by Mario Batista multiple times, I'd be like, okay, maybe he's starting to lose it. He's not even being taken down. He still has the best takedown defense in MMA. He still has the best leg kick defense, arguably. This guy is a beast today, not in his prime. I'm not saying that. He certainly was not out of his prime when he was fighting Alexander Volkanovski at the age of 31. I don't want to hear it. Demetrius Johnson, yes, he has a loss to Henry Cejudo. I understand it, but listen, again, a very, very close fight with Henry Cejudo. By the way, they're 1-1. DJ's win is better than Cejudo's. Well, it's actually arguable because Cejudo won a decision, so that's actually pretty impressive. But very close fight with Henry Cejudo. He lost it. That's not like he's getting shown up or outclassed. And outside of that, he got knocked out in ONE FC, but then he got it back 2 times. That's a pretty decent fighter that he was fighting. And I just think that DJ went over Cejudo, multiple wins over Benavidez. a bunch of good wins. He has so much quantity, so little losses. I just kind of give him the edge because of that. Even though Jose Aldo has better quality, his quality doesn't shit on Demetrius Johnson's quality, I don't think. And I really do think the losses, again, they're not the best. I think that if Aldo wins one more fight, I'll put him again ahead of DJ. But right now, I got DJ just ahead of him just a little bit the more I think about that. Kamaru Usman at number 10. People may say, whoa, wait, Kamaru Usman above Demetrius Johnson, Kamaru Usman above Jose Aldo? I'll explain to you why. Yes, we've seen Kamaru get head kick KO'd by Leon Edwards, and we've seen him get beat by decision. Since then, Kamaru Usman has not lost. And you may be saying, what about the Khamzat? I'm sorry, I count that as a draw. I saw Kamaru Usman win the second round and the third round against Khamzat Chimaev. And although that is not a win, it is not a loss. And it's somewhat impressive to take Khamzat to a draw. I'm not going to count that as a big win, but I'm not saying like, oh, Usman's on a 3-fight loss streak. Like, the judges can get it wrong sometimes. But also, he beat the guy that he lost to. He has a win over Leon Edwards back in the day. So that's still something. It's aged well. And he has a win over Sean Strickland back in the day, which is aged well. It's like Conor McGregor's win over Max Holloway. It's kind of similar, even though those guys were very early on in their career. But you look at Kamaru Usman, wins over RDA. It's pretty decent. It's not the best. Colby Covington twice. It's decent. It's not aging that well these days, but it's pretty decent. You know, Colby was good back in the day. And then you've got Jorge Masvidal. You have Gilbert Burns. Woodley. That's the guy that I forget. Woodley. Kamaru beat him. Destroyed him. So I have Kamaru just slightly ahead. And the thing is, Usman can continue to rise. I said that this is sort of like a pound-for-pound list. And again, people really continue to say things like Lucas always changes his GOAT list. And I understand it can be kind of funny, but at the same time, it's like, dude, Kamaru Usman is competing with retired fighters. He's a top 15 fighter of all time. If he continues to win, he's going to move up. Like, how would he not? Why is it the case that, like, when people are actively fighting, they cannot move up on the GOAT list? And the retired fighters hold their place. And the way that we finally switch them, if they're ever going to be replaced, is when the current fighters of today have hung up the gloves, you know, they're done with their career, and then we can have the discussion. No, man, the discussion is based on resume alone for the most part. Okay, so I got Kamaru at number 10. Max, number 9. Max has moved down from the number 8 spot, and he's moved down even after I moved him down after getting KO'd by Ilia Topuria. He's moved down again. Why? Because I think Merab Dvalishvili has overtaken Max. While Max Holloway got KO'd, Merab won. And Merab Dvalishvili's wins have aged even better. I'm talking about Jan. Merab beat Jan. That's his best win. Since then, Jan has won twice. Jan has a 2-fight win streak against Song Yadong and one of the greatest flyweights ever in Davidson Figueiredo, who was on a crazy win streak at bantamweight. So I think Merab beating Umar Nurmagomedov, say what you want, that win on paper, resume-wise, Umar doesn't have the best resume. It's going to age really well. That's going to do wonders for Merab. But we're talking about right now, that's still a good win based on Umar Nurmagomedov just being, we know how good he is. Like, you don't just outclass Sandhagen that easily on the feet and not be amazing. Like, people talk about Sandhagen as being this next-level striker. He's the one guy that can outstrike O'Malley in the bantamweight division. It's like, fuck no, not at all. I disagree, but people will talk about him as such, and I have a feeling that those are the same types of people that will say things like, Umar Nurmagomedov's resume sucks, brother. Even though they'll say that Sandhagen would beat O'Malley on the feet. But he's got a win over Umar. He's got a win over Jan. And Jan's resume is just amazing. He's got a win over Cejudo. He's got a win over Aldo, who was on a 3-fight win streak going into that fight. That was years ago, and Aldo's still pretty good, but, you know, maybe not prime Aldo, but still a good win. He's got a win over John Dodson, okay? Not only does he have a win over John Dodson, he's got a win over George Rickerton, okay? I just made that name up. I'm actually searching for other names, dude. I'm searching for other names. I got to come up with them quickly. Who am I forgetting? I always forget somebody. O'Malley. Merab's got a win over O'Malley. And you may say, O'Malley's resume is shit. O'Malley beat Aljo. He knocked his ass out. That's pretty impressive. He beat Aljo. And he beat Marlon Vera, which is not the best win ever, but it's just a decent win. It's an okay win. And, that's very impressive. Okay. So Moraes as well. That's a pretty okay win, Moraes. That's a pretty okay win. It's not aged well, though. Yeah, I think Merab, the reason why I moved him above Max, I know Max has so many great wins. I understand that. It's just because, and Merab's only one place above Max. If Max wins again, I move Max above Merab if it's a really good fighter, like a Charles. But it's because Max has lost in his prime quite a few times, whereas Merab has lost in his prime 0 times. So that's kind of the difference. At the number 7 spot, I have Khabib, the great Khabib at number 7. Some people aren't going to like that for different reasons. I feel like some people are going to say it's too high. Some people are going to say it's too low. Some people are going to say Khabib not even top 10. Some people are going to say Khabib's, what the hell, man? He's the most dominant fighter ever, brother. But I have Khabib at number 7. I still think there's something to be said about being undefeated. That's perfect ratio. And even though he doesn't have the craziest quantity of quality wins, a win over Justin Gaethje, I actually think is underrated. Stylistically, maybe not so much, but still, Justin Gaethje, in my opinion, has an underrated resume. He's beaten so many good fighters. Just look at his resume. He's beaten so many great guys, including Dustin Poirier, which is a great win. Tony Ferguson snapped his win streak. Rafael Fiziev, he was not supposed to win that. Michael Chandler, that's just one of them, right? He's got a lot of them. Justin Gaethje, in my opinion, has a good resume. Conor McGregor, and of course, Dustin Poirier, Edson Barboza, RDA back in the day was a really solid win. So I still think Khabib at number 7, just because, again, he has enough quality mixed with the undefeated status. And that's not like he's like 5-0 undefeated. He's number 7. No, he's 13-0 in the UFC. Got some quality, undefeated, very dominant. Alex Pereira, I have Pereira at the number 6 spot. I had him at the number 5 spot, but I've switched him with Ilia Topuria. I'm sorry. I think that if Alex beats Magomed, I am going to put him in the top 5, right? I think that will bring him above Topuria, just because at that point he would be 10-1 in the UFC. Right now, I believe he's 9-1. 10-1, beating your toughest stylistic matchup on paper in Magomed, the guy that can wrestle, right? That's like sort of Merab beating his toughest stylistic matchup in Umar, except Magomed actually has a better resume a little bit. So I think that Alex with one more is going to move above Topuria. He'd be 10-1. That'd be a great ratio. Topuria's 8-0. So right now, 9-1, 8-0. And you may say, well, look at Pereira. Oh, he's beaten so many guys. But it's like, yes, but I also don't really think that a Khalil Roundtree win is that much better than like a Josh Emmett win or a Bryce Mitchell win. Like, it's maybe a tiny bit better than a Bryce Mitchell win, but it's not that much better than a Josh Emmett win. And you also have Yusuf Salau back in the day that Ilia Topuria beat. I think the Yusuf Salau win's really good. It's aging really well. Yusuf Salau has been dominating people. That's starting to look like Islam Makhachev's Arman Saryukian win. But ultimately, if you look at Alex Pereira's best wins against, for example, Strickland, Adesanya, Yuri, and Blachowicz, he's 1-1 with Adesanya. Whereas Ilia Topuria, knocking out Volk, knocking out Max, he's not 1-1 with these guys. He's 2-0 over these guys. And I just think Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski being top 10 fighters, those are just way better than any of the wins that Alex Pereira has. And again, some people may say, well, the Volk win, there's an asterisk because he was coming off of a KO against Makhachev, but it's like, I'm sorry, I just don't really see an asterisk at all. Volkanovski didn't get KO'd because his chin was out of whack. He got KO'd because he got hit with one of the hardest punches you could possibly get hit with in MMA. Okay, maybe Volk didn't fight his fight, okay, but I still think he fought a pretty good fight. It's just that it's not Volk's chin after the Makhachev fight, and it's no longer the same. No, he just got caught by a guy with dynamite. All right, so I have Ilia Topuria just ahead, 8-0 versus 9-1. I think that those monstrous wins over Volkanovski and Max Holloway sort of edge it out for Topuria, but it's very close. Again, if Alex beats Magomed, I'll move him up. But let's get to number 4. I got Volk. I got Volk at number 4, man. What are you going to say, man? I got Volk at number 4. You just know how it is. He beat Jose Aldo back in the day. He didn't just beat him. He schooled him on the feet. You know, it's one thing to knock Aldo out. It's one thing to KO Aldo. It's another thing to smudge him up against the fence when you can't take him down. But out leg kicking Jose Aldo and holding Aldo to less than 30 strikes in the course of 3 rounds. And it's not like Volk landed 43 and Aldo landed 29. No, Volk landed 90 plus significant strikes and Aldo landed less than 30. And he out-leg kicked Aldo as some of the best leg kick defense in UFC history. Now, it may have not been the most entertaining fight, but Volk kind of schooled Aldo. That's pretty impressive. Okay, and we're going to get to the Max Holloway fights. Hey, there's something to be said about knocking out Max. To be honest, that's incredible for Ilia Topuria. I'm not about to make the claim that Volk's wins are necessarily better than Ilia's over Max, but there's something to be said about Volk schooling Max for 5 rounds. Say what you want about Ilia Topuria. There was a bit of a war that he had with Ilia in that third fight. Volkanovski only had one of those with Max, and that was that second fight, and happened to be one of the greatest comebacks of all time. There's something to be said about that, too. Okay? And then, of course, he just schooled him. Third fight. First fight came in and shut it down. So that's 3. Okay? And then you've got the Mendes fight. All right? You may be thinking I'm going to bring up TKZ, I'm going to bring up this and that. No. Let's talk about Mendes. Mendes was in his early 30s. Okay? Mendes was still beasting it out. Okay? And he's got the Ortega one. And he's got the TKZ one. Now, people are going to say TKZ this, TKZ that. Dude, Volkanovski fought a TKZ on a winning streak. And made him look like, the town fool. All right, had him stumbling and bumbling, flopping on the deck like a fish. And, of course, you got the Yair win, man. And you just got 6 others as well, nothing to brag about. I still have Volkanovski at the number 4 spot. Number 3, Islam Makhachev. I still have Islam at the number 3 spot. He has not moved up since beating Renato Moicano, although in my opinion, he would have moved up if he had beat Arman Tsarukyan. He's very close to passing George St Pierre. I really just have them neck and neck. And again, you may say, dude, GSP lost to this guy back in the day. It's like Makhachev lost to another guy back in the day as well. But either way, listen, the Renato Moicano win, it's great. It adds a solid quantity win to his list. It's better than his earliest wins in the UFC for sure. I would say it's better than the Thiago Moises win. It's better than the Drew Dober win. But I would say it's kind of on par with the Dan Hooker win. I would say they're very similar, which is a good win. It's a good win. But I still think it's right behind just George St Pierre, because if you look at when George St Pierre was fighting, he was still fighting people that were really solid back in the day, and he had so much quantity and very little losses in his prime. And the Michael Bisping win, brother, just everybody know this, brother. The Bisping win, brother. Yeah, listen, I'm joking about that. The Bisping win was not that great. I wouldn't mind the argument, but the Volkanovski 2 fight, there's a bit of an asterisk. Okay, yes, knocking him out is great. It's impressive to KO Volk in the first round. It's not like Volk was gassed because he had no camp, but it was a fat Volk with a horrible weight cut, with the arm injury. He was injured going into that fight. I'm sorry, man. There's a bit of an asterisk on that. But other than that, number 3 all time. I just can't really move him up a whole spot. So I still have GSP at 2. I have Jon Jones at the number 1 spot. I think if Makhachev beats one more fighter, if he has another win like Renato Moicano, 2 of those style of wins would put him above GSP for sure. I would have him at my number 2 spot. If he beats Arman Tsarukyan, of course, he's number 2. I think if Makhachev wins 2 more fights, assuming one of them is the sort of fighter like Arman, that type of level, or if he beats an Ilia Topuria next, and then he moves up and wins a welterweight belt, if he has 2 more really solid, amazing wins, and they're not just rematch or fight Justin Gage or something like that, I think he's the GOAT of the sport. I know that some people, dude, it's funny to me because some people just still can't get with the reality. Some people are so stuck in the past with their rose-tinted glasses that they just can't see logic to this type of conversation. Some people are going to think like that. 2 more wins? What are you talking about? That'd only be 5 title defenses. Makhachev with 2 more wins would be the GOAT of the sport. Unless Jon Jones beats Tom Aspinall. If Jon Jones beats Tom Aspinall, then it's a whole different conversation. Maybe Makhachev would need 3 more. Maybe he would need to defend a belt at welterweight. All right, that's when it would start getting interesting. But if Islam wins 2 more, he's the GOAT, in my opinion. But the 2 wins have to be big. An Arman Tsarukyan win, a welterweight title, that's what we're talking about. Ilia Topuria, welterweight title, that's what we're talking about. But I think that resume would be the best of all time. Nobody could compete with that. But yeah, that's the GOAT list right now that we're working with. Makhachev still at the 3 spot. Merab is now at the 8 spot. It's like the pound for pound list. The only fighters that can move up are active fighters. because how could a guy that's been retired for 5 years move up on the GOAT list? It just doesn't make sense. And no, you don't just get to hold down your spot just because. And also, sometimes wins can just age really well. For example, like Max Holloway. If Max Holloway doesn't fight for the next year, but everybody that he's beaten, let's say Justin Gaethje, let's say Calvin Kattar, let's say Brian Ortega, if these people like win 3 fights, let's say they all win 3 fights, everyone that Max Holloway's ever beat, he might even move up just because of those wins aging really well. So that's another way where you can kind of move up, or you can move down a little bit, like TJ beating Cody Garbrandt. Back in the day, that was insane. Now, it's not that amazing. So either way, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time.